Frank Lucas walked through the front door of the 32nd Precinct in Harlem carrying a leather briefcase. Inside that briefcase was $500,000 in cash. Every bill counted, every stack wrapped, every dollar about to change how crime worked in New York City forever. The desk sergeant looked up. A well-dressed black man walking into a police station after midnight wasn't unusual in Harlem. But something about Frank Lucas was different. The way he moved. The way he looked around the room like he owned it. The way he set that briefcase down on the counter like it contained tomorrow's newspaper. Not $500,000. "I'm here to see Captain Morrison," Frank said. His voice was calm, quiet, not the voice of someone asking for a favor, the voice of someone about to make an offer. The sergeant frowned. "Captain's busy. You got an appointment?" Frank smiled. "He'll want to see me." What happened in the next 3 hours turned the most corrupt police precinct in Manhattan into Frank Lucas's personal security force. And it started 6 months earlier when Frank realized he had a problem money couldn't solve. Until tonight. The problem was simple. Frank Lucas was making too much money. By 1970, Frank's Blue Magic heroin operation was generating $1 million a day. Pure heroin from the Golden Triangle, shipped through military channels, distributed through his family network across Harlem, Brooklyn, and the Bronx. Frank had done what no black drug dealer had ever done before. He'd cut out the Italian mafia completely. But success brought attention, and attention brought police raids. 3 times in 2 months, the NYPD had raided Frank's operations. Each time they'd seized product, arrested dealers, disrupted business. Not because they were honest cops doing their job, because they wanted their cut. The corruption system was simple. Italian mobsters paid police captains. Police captains protected Italian territories. But Frank wasn't Italian. Frank wasn't paying anyone. So the police treated him like a target instead of a partner. Frank watched his profits drop, watched his dealers get arrested, watched corrupt cops steal his heroin and sell it back to competitors. And Frank realized something the Italian mafia had figured out decades ago. You don't fight the system, you buy it. But Frank Lucas wasn't going to buy it the Italian way. No monthly payments, no tribute, no percentage. Frank was going to make the police work for him directly. Like employees, like soldiers, like an army with badges and guns. The plan was brilliant in its simplicity. Find the most corrupt precinct in Manhattan. Walk in with enough money to buy every cop on duty. Make them an offer they couldn't refuse, not because of the money, but because of what refusing would mean. Captain Sean Morrison had been running the 32nd Precinct for 8 years. In that time, he'd taken bribes from bookmakers, protection money from numbers runners, and payments from 3 different mob families. Morrison was corrupt, but he was smart corrupt. Never too greedy, never too obvious, never caught. Morrison controlled 47 uniformed officers and 12 detectives. Every single one of them dirty. Some took money from dealers. Some stole drugs during raids. Some provided information to criminals. The 32nd Precinct wasn't a police station. It was a criminal organization with government backing. Frank had studied Morrison for 3 weeks, watched his patterns, his payments, his people. Frank knew Morrison took $5,000 a month from the Genovese family, knew he split it with his lieutenants, knew the entire precinct was for sale to whoever paid the most. Tonight, Frank was going to make an offer that would end Morrison's relationship with the mob forever. The sergeant buzzed Morrison's office. "Captain, there's a guy here wants to see you. Says it's important." Morrison's voice crackled through the intercom. "What's his name?" The sergeant looked at Frank. Frank hadn't given his name. He just smiled and opened the briefcase slightly. The sergeant's eyes went wide. Stacks of $100 bills, neatly arranged. More money than he'd see in 10 years of police work. "He says you'll want to see him," the sergeant said into the intercom. Silence. Then Morrison's door opened. Captain Sean Morrison was 52 years old, 6 feet tall, Irish, with the face of a man who'd seen everything and trusted nothing. He looked at Frank, then at the briefcase, then back at Frank. "My office," Morrison said. Frank followed Morrison down a hallway past empty desks and sleeping officers. Morrison's office was small, cluttered, with pictures of Morrison shaking hands with politicians and police commissioners. The desk was covered in paperwork, coffee cups, and a bottle of whiskey that wasn't hidden very well. Morrison closed the door, locked it, and sat down behind his desk. Frank sat across from him, the briefcase on his lap. "You're Frank Lucas," Morrison said. It wasn't a question. "I am." "You're the guy selling that blue magic bullshit in my precinct." "I am." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "And you walked into my police station at midnight with a briefcase full of cash because you want to make a deal." Frank opened the briefcase, turned it around, and pushed it across Morrison's desk. Morrison looked down at the money. More cash than he'd ever seen in one place. More money than he'd make in 20 years of police work. $500,000, Frank said quietly. "That's what's in that case." Morrison didn't touch the money. "What do you want for it?" "I want to hire you." Morrison frowned. "Hire me?" "You and every cop in this precinct. I want to put all of you on my payroll. Not as a bribe, not as protection money, as employees." Morrison stared at Frank. In 8 years of taking bribes, no one had ever made an offer like this. "You want to hire the police?" "I want to hire your police. The 32nd Precinct works for me now. You raid my competitors. You protect my operations. You provide security for my shipments. You arrest anyone who threatens my business. And instead of taking $5,000 a month from the Genovese family, you take $50,000 a month from me." Morrison was quiet for a long moment. $50,000 a month? For you. Your lieutenants get $10,000 each. Regular officers get $2,000. Detectives get $5,000. Every month cash, no questions asked. Morrison did the math in his head. That was $300,000 a month for the entire precinct. More money than they'd ever made from corruption. His current arrangement with the Genovese family brought in maybe $8,000 total per month for the whole precinct. Frank was offering nearly 40 times that amount. "You're talking about turning us into your private security force," Morrison said slowly, "making us accessories to federal crimes, drug trafficking, racketeering, murder maybe." "I'm talking about making you rich," Frank replied. "What you call it is your business. And what happens if I say no?" Frank's expression didn't change. "Then I take this money to the 28th Precinct, or the 30th, or the 25th. Someone's going to take this deal, Captain. The question is whether it's going to be you." Morrison looked at the money again. "You know what you're asking me to do? You're asking me to turn my precinct into your private army. I'm asking you to be honest about what you already are. You're corrupt. Your cops are corrupt. You take money from criminals every month. I'm just offering to be the only criminal you work for." Morrison stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the empty street. Frank waited. The clock on Morrison's desk ticked. Somewhere in the building, a telephone rang. "The Genovese family's not going to like this," Morrison said finally. "The Genovese family doesn't own you. I'm about to." Morrison turned around. "What about other precincts, other cops who aren't on your payroll?" "That's my problem, not yours. Your job is to control your territory. My territory is now your territory." Morrison sat back down, looked at the money one more time. "If I do this, there's no going back. The mob finds out I'm working for you instead of them. I'm a dead man." Frank leaned forward. "Captain, I make $1 million a day selling heroin. The mob makes $1 million a month selling the same product. Who do you think is going to win this war?" Morrison was silent for another moment. Then he reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a notebook. "I'm going to need a list of every cop in this precinct. I'm going to need to know which ones I can trust and which ones might talk to internal affairs or the feds." Frank nodded. "Make the list." Morrison wrote for 10 minutes. Names, ranks, notes about each officer's level of corruption and reliability. When he finished, he tore the page out and handed it to Frank. 47 officers, 12 detectives, 38 of them are solid. They'll take the money and keep their mouths shut. The other 21 are risks. "What kind of risks?" 15 of them are clean, never taken a bribe, never looked the other way. They do this job because they believe in it. 6 of them are ambitious. They'd sell out their own mothers for a promotion. Frank studied the list. The clean ones transfer out, make up reasons, budget cuts, disciplinary issues, whatever. I don't want honest cops in my precinct. The ambitious ones get a choice. Take the money or take a beating. Morrison nodded. And the 38 solid ones? They get rich. Frank stood up, closed the briefcase, and pushed it across the desk. That's your first payment. Distribute it however you want. But Captain, understand something. This isn't a protection racket. This isn't the mob. This is employment. You work for me now, all of you. Morrison looked at the briefcase. When do we start? You started the moment you took that money. Tomorrow I'll send you a list of addresses. Competitors, dealers who aren't part of my operation, anyone selling product in my territory. You raid them. You arrest them. You seize their drugs and their money. And what do we do with the drugs and money we seize? Frank smiled. You bring them to me, like good employees should. Morrison shook Frank's hand. Welcome to the NYPD, Mr. Lucas. Frank walked out of the 32nd Precinct at 2:51 a.m. The desk sergeant watched him leave, but didn't ask any questions. Whatever had happened in Captain Morrison's office, it wasn't his business. By morning, the transformation had begun. Morrison called a roll call meeting for every cop on duty. 38 officers gathered in the main room. Morrison stood at the front with the briefcase open beside him. Gentlemen, we have a new arrangement, Morrison announced. Effective immediately, this precinct is under contract with a private security consultant. Our job is to provide specialized law enforcement services for specific operations in Harlem. The cops looked confused. Private security consultant, specialized services? Morrison continued. Each of you will receive a monthly bonus for this additional work. The amount depends on your rank and your participation level. He started calling names. Officer Martinez, step forward. Martinez walked to the front. Morrison handed him an envelope. $2,000 monthly. Martinez opened the envelope, saw the cash, and his expression changed. What do I have to do for it? Follow orders. Ask no questions. Keep your mouth shut. Officer Rodriguez was next. He opened his envelope, counted the bills twice, looked around at his fellow officers. Captain, is this legal? Morrison stared at him. Rodriguez, you've been taking money from bookmakers for 3 years. You really want to talk about legal? Rodriguez shut his mouth. Detective Collins stepped forward when his name was called. 15-year veteran, 3 commendations. But Morrison knew Collins had gambling debts that were killing him. Collins opened his envelope, saw $5,000, and his hands started shaking. This is real? Collins whispered. As real as your debt to Jimmy the Fish, Morrison replied, and a lot safer than what happens when you can't pay him back. Morrison called the next name, then the next. Envelopes of cash, more money than any of these cops had ever seen. By the end of roll call, every officer in the room was holding an envelope. One more thing, Morrison said. Anyone who doesn't want to participate in this arrangement can transfer to another precinct. Anyone who wants to participate but talks to internal affairs, the feds, or the media will have a very serious accident. Nobody asked to transfer. Within a week, the 32nd Precinct had raided 15 drug operations that competed with Frank Lucas. They arrested 47 dealers, seized 200 kilograms of heroin, and confiscated $800,000 in cash. All of it went directly to Frank. Within a month, Frank's competition in Harlem had been eliminated. Every dealer in the precinct's territory either worked for Frank or sat in jail. The 32nd Precinct had become Frank's private police force. Within 6 months, Frank had expanded the arrangement to 3 more precincts, the 28th, the 30th, and the 25th. Each precinct captain received the same offer Morrison had received. Each one took it. Captain Williams of the 28th lasted exactly 12 minutes before accepting Frank's briefcase. Captain O'Malley of the 30th tried to negotiate for more money and settled for the original terms when Frank started to leave. Captain Torres of the 25th asked only one question. When do we start? The network operated like a legitimate business. Frank provided target lists every Monday. Raids happened every Tuesday and Thursday. Seized drugs and money were delivered to Frank's warehouses every Friday. The system was so efficient that Frank's competitors started leaving Harlem voluntarily rather than face arrest by their own police force. By 1971, Frank Lucas had 60 police officers, 23 detectives, and 4 precinct captains on his payroll. The NYPD wasn't investigating Frank Lucas anymore. They were working for him. But Frank made one mistake. He got comfortable. He got careless. And in 1975, Detective Richie Roberts, a cop who couldn't be bought, brought Frank's empire crashing down. When Frank was arrested, the investigation revealed the depth of police corruption in his organization. 43 officers were indicted. 4 captains were sentenced to federal prison. Morrison was convicted on 17 counts of racketeering and served 12 years. But for 5 years from 1970 to 1975, Frank Lucas had done something no criminal in American history had ever done. He'd bought an entire police force, not with bribes or threats, but with employment contracts. The night Frank walked into the 32nd precinct with $500,000 cash, he wasn't just making a drug deal. He was revolutionizing organized crime, proving that the difference between a criminal and a businessman is just paperwork. Captain Morrison died in federal prison in 1987. Heart attack. He was 59 years old. In his cell, investigators found a notebook. Inside were detailed records of every payment Frank Lucas had made to the 32nd precinct. 5 years of corruption, documented with the precision of a business ledger. The last entry, dated the day before Morrison's arrest, was a single line. Lucas operation complete. Total received $3.2 million. Best job I ever had. Frank Lucas understood something about power that most criminals never learn. You don't fight the system. You don't bribe the system. You buy the system completely and then you become the system. For 5 years, Frank Lucas wasn't just a drug dealer. He was the police.